why would a blind spot exist in the first place? It's like, well, in order for a dominant instinct to exist, you have to have a blind spot. That's the only way
Right,
you'd be
exactly.
able to be so obsessed with your first instinct.
I'm compensating, and I don't even know I'm compensating.
Oh,
So it's like using a muscle that I've literally never used, but like to me, I'm like, why use it?
You can really be fucked up in self-pres and be self-pres dominant.
Dominant instinct, you're going to be noticing more often that you're not good at it because
Yes.
you're looking at it all the time.
The Big Hormone Enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. Let you know that the man has got to deal with it.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, 4-5 wing, 4-5-8 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9-1, 9-7-4 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with age 5-4 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 3-6-9 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Welcome back to Big Hormone Enneagram. We are going into an instinct topic today, but before we do, I'm going to do some plugs. First, buy my book, please. You can buy it on bookshop.org, amazon.com, Barnes & Nobles. You've been listening to our stuff, all this free, juicy content. Please contribute something to some of the shit we're doing. David has his Trifix guidebook on Enneagrammer.com and Enneasite.com. This visual guide on trifix and stems. Very good. We have our 100th episode coming up, and so we want your sweet nothings and your criticisms, complaints, how this podcast may have affected you, what you've gotten out of it, what you don't like, your searing hatred, salacious whatevers, all that. And then we are doing
the number. Well,
oh yeah, the love line number. Emeka's got it.
the number is 323-696-0647.
And finally, Enneagrammer.com's Dark Arts Academy that Emeka, Joseph, and David are doing together is fucking hilarious, and you learn a lot. It's very funny. It's very interesting. And you get to see their handsome faces as they go through video. So that's $19 a month on Enneagrammer.com.
Hey, what spell are they teaching this week?
Who are we doing this week?
No.
We're doing the
Oh.
Slytherin, Hufflepuff,
Guardia
Dipsy
della Rosa.
You're so not even in Harry Potter that went right
Oh
over
my
your
gosh,
head.
Yeah, I completely lost. I just thought it was a cool name, okay?
Womp womp.
So one more announcement that we have. Those of you with sharp ears can probably notice that myself and John sound a little bit clearer and a little bit better today. That is because we are finally taking our podcast a little bit more seriously and investing in better sound equipment. So, I'm announcing that we are trying to raise money for all this equipment. What we are trying to do is get all of us better microphones. Right now, we're using a microphone that's in the $70 to $80 range. We want to get an audio interface so that we can eventually record a live podcast, like a video podcast with all of our microphones hooked up whenever we do meet up. So yeah, just we're trying to raise $500 for all of this audio equipment. If you appreciate this podcast and you're sick and tired of David's mouth noises, and you
Don't tell them that, though. They won't give us any money.
Donate some money at we have a PayPal account that's hooked up to BHEpodcast@gmail.com. If you prefer Venmo, you can send some cash to this my Venmo account. Let me look it up because I don't
Which
have
is
it up.
not sketchy at all.
I think
Anybody-
I'm comfortable with just going to yours as long as people write the little fucking note.
Yeah. Okay, so if you prefer Venmo, you can send whatever you wish to donate to the Venmo account EMEKV. Just add a note that this is for the BHE podcast, and all of that money will go towards getting us better sound equipment.
Buy us
So-
a
And
little
anybody who
Christmas gift.
sends over $200 gets feet pics from who knows.
We should have prizes. Yes, if you donate $50, we're gonna do something.
pics.
Actually,
Feet
yeah,
pics.
we should come up with
Totally.
prizes.
Yeah.
Or
50, 100.
I'm not
and-
saying we have good feet. I'm just saying you will get feet pics.
feet boys and feet girls out there.
Consensual or not.
Yeah, we'll come up with some prizes next time we announce this. But
We
yes,
might just
if-
send you feet because.
Yeah,
You know,
just,
you don't send
just
anything.
because, honestly.
Or a continuous loop of my mouth noises.
Oh, God. We're just going to pipe it into their house and never stop.
But yeah, Christmas season's coming up. You're thinking about getting presents for your loved ones. Donate to support this podcast that you love so much. So
Oh yeah, buy my book for your loved ones for Christmas that you like can't think of what to buy them, and that you've been talking about this stupid Enneagram thing forever, and you're trying to get them into it. You use my book as a Christmas gift if you can't think of anything.
Yeah. It's a good Christmas gift.
So yeah, your platonic life partners with benefits are talking today about a phenomenon that comes up regularly when we do coaching of various kinds and working with people, which is how can I be a social type, or how can I be a sexual type, or how can I be a self-preservation type when I'm so bad at that instinct? That's a really, really common issue, and in some ways it can make, from a description point of view and trying to understand yourself based on words and concepts, it can be hard to discriminate what makes a sexual dominant versus a sexual blind, or a social dominant versus a social blind, and what are you reacting to and what are you ignoring, and what's the nature of the blind spot. So we're getting into that today.
what you were saying on the blind spot is something that comes up a lot. Not just people saying, how can I be dominant in this instinct? I suck at this instinct. But how can I be blind in this instinct? I
I'm
think
so
I'm
good at
doing
it.
I'm doing all of these pretty well. So that seems to be a common thing that comes up.
Yeah, I mean, on the onset, in terms of blind spot, like we are literally blind to what the instinct means and represent. So I am social blind, and for a long time I'd be like, yeah, I know how to make friends, and like I just don't like that many people, but a lot of social type don't like many people, so I'm kind of just doing social, like. And then you just find new layers of what it means to omit a certain instinctual intelligence in your life, and how much that really costs you. And I think it's something that you never really learn the full lesson of. But to sort of recognize the definitions and ideas that you're operating from to understand what a particular instinct is incomplete. Like it's something very deep and experiential, and whatever our blind spot is that we just don't have experience with it in a kind of a lived way.
I think part of something I don't see discussed much is, where did the concept of the blind spot originate? Like, why isn't it the case that some people could be balanced on maybe their last two? Like, why is it set up that way that there is a blind spot to begin with?
Yeah, I actually don't know the origin. I can't remember.
Or the even idea of a stacking. Like, where did that originate?
I think that originated with Chazo. He definitely was the one who like included the instincts with the Enneagram type,
Mhm.
and he said in, I think it was like the intro to Facets of Unity by Almas, that he was drawing on Sufi psychology, which is pretty vague because there's a lot that can constitute as Sufi psychology. There's not one psychology, there's a lot of different schools and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I can't remember where the concept of the blind spot really originated, and I think a lot of different people uh, probably lay claim to that idea, but I'm not sure where it started.
From my perspective, conceptually, looking at not just the Enneagram, but the idea of personality itself, is that you're overbalanced in order to, like, the idea of fixation. So if you're fixated at point 3, for example, that fixation means that you're not paying attention to something else, which creates kind of like there's a shadow
Mhm.
that's going on. So the idea of a blind spot isn't really that far-fetched when we're talking about personality, because at the core of studying personality is seeing that there's something I'm not paying attention to. Like my lens on the world is just one aspect of all of reality. So the idea of an instinctual blind spot shouldn't be really far-fetched for people, because in order to have a dominant instinct, that means that you're really not paying attention to one aspect or one of the instincts.
Do you think it's possible to not have a blind spot after like years of work?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because the reason that instinct would get distorted at all, like there would be any imbalance to make stacking at all, it's because instinct is the basis of ego. Instinct is the basis of personality. So when there's identification distortion, uh, I see it as a result of loss of a contact with essence, or to put it another way, like a loss of the true function of the heart and the mind. And so it's sort of this, like a kind of collapse into putting too much in the instincts, like putting too much energy into what the instincts mean and represent. And so that in itself is a huge imbalance, that it's kind of like imbalances the instincts. And that, our fixation, as Emeka was speaking to, our fixation on one instinct over the other two is kind of like my, my sense of survival, my sense of psychological survival, physical survival, but also my sense of how I'm going to get reconnected to love, and whatever I associate with God or spirituality is like it's going to come through the dominant instinct. And so, as Emeka is speaking to, it's like all your eggs are going into one basket, and it seems pretty natural that something would seem to be competitive, or an obstacle to giving all the attention or focus on the dominant instinct. And it seems like in everybody, when you're putting all your eggs in that basket, that something's got to go, something's got to give, and something seems somehow disruptive to it. And I think our Bhava Chakra stacking episodes, like we don't play it out explicitly, but I think you can get the feel from those episodes and those qualities that show up in each stacking, that it's not just arbitrary, or it's not just inconsequential. Like there's like a lot riding on what we omit, uh, what we leave out in the blind spot, which instinct becomes our blind spot, has a lot to do with the what I think is probably like a very early life impression of how our dominant instinct was met. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know who had said this, but my understanding of instincts, it seemed, helped me understand the instincts in that in order for you to be so focused on your dominant instinct, that your blind spot is a threat to that. And
Right.
so in order to focus, for example, to focus on to social feels like a threat to my sexual, because
Right.
I'm
Mhm.
so invested in sexual, that the blind spot is something you push away from in order to continue your identification with your first instinct. So just kind of like examining, like, why would a blind spot exist in the first place? It's like, well, in order for a dominant instinct to exist, you have to have a blind spot. That's the only way
Right,
you'd be able
exactly.
to be so obsessed with your first instinct.
Right. And I think it's just the case that the middle instinct is just not seen as not, and therefore can get pulled into supplementing the energy going into the dominant, but it's not seen as a threat. Like it's not seen as a distraction. And so, uh, like just speaking for my own stacking, like social, integrating social and accessing social feels like it's dispersing all that concentrated sexual energy that I feel like as a sexual self prize, I need to get my dominant uh, instinctual needs met.
Hmm.
And so I think there's something similar and true with everybody. But when it comes to like what I see often, I don't know what you guys think, but most often I see people overestimating their uh, connection with the sexual instinct when they're sexually blind. Is that y'all's
Yeah,
experience?
Yeah,
by
myself
far.
included.
Yeah. So Nancy, I'm curious, like what your experience with that is.
Yeah, well, I view sexual as kind of a form of manipulation. Like, not necessarily negative. It's just kind of a form of manipulating people's experience. Like I'm not saying that's a correct way of viewing
Sure.
it. That's just sort of like my go-to. And as a 3, that's what I do best. So I
Mhm.
think for a long time I viewed myself as sexual because I was like, well, I can get what I want out of people. I can manipulate people. I can make them think that, like,
You can
I am the
seduce.
best thing ever. Yeah, I can seduce.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I can hook them, right? Which sounds similar to sexual, but the reasoning behind it is not at all
Mhm.
sexual. So I think understanding the reasoning behind it is the most important part
Well, I think what you're
for me,
speaking
anyway.
to is it like there's a sort of a out of touchness with the reasoning behind sexual apart from that sort of function or utility, which means that I'm unaware of a whole range of what sexual is on its own.
Mm.
Like,
Yes.
one of the things that we've spoken to with people who are sexual blind is that they can really resist or be out of touch with like their bodies, not just being horny, but like which usually sexual blind people are very aware of their horny levels, but their visceral sense of being turned on or even taken by sexual energy with somebody else.
Mhm.
And so it'll kind of be like they'll think like they're having, and this is true with all the blind spots, but there's a way that you can imagine you're having like fulfilling or peak experiences with the blind spot, and then you find out that what you thought it was not happening at all. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
So with the sexual blind spot, it's like it's hard to imagine what the feeling of being taken and being like truly you could say seduced or uh
Penetrated.
yeah, penetrated, like in a way that is actually has the kind of energetic wildness and unpredictability of the sexual drive, like what that has when it's not just being kind of compartmentalized and utilized for some other end.
Yeah, it's been interesting doing these dark arts videos because our typing methods or at any grammar we use collages to get at a way that instincts are showing up with psychological boundaries and sensation. But it's been interesting to watch people's videos, as we comment on people's types to find what sexual is doing moment to moment, and it's just been giving me some new insights on this is what sexual is doing on a moment to moment basis if you don't have any sort of evidence to look at in terms of how this is showing up in someone's life. If I were to watch an interview, could I find sexual in this person? And one of the interesting things that we've noticed about sexual types or people who have sexual in their stacking is just the sense of energetically penetrating and being penetrated, where there is this chaotic element of they're playing that attraction chemistry game of you say something, you give me something, and I take it and it does something to me, and I spit back something else that could provoke you. So it's not social, it's not self-pres. There's an energetic sort of co-creating thing about chemistry
Mm,
of allowing the moment or whatever it is that person that you're hooked up to penetrate you and to take it, and there's like a alchemical thing that happens where you spit something out that can also generate electricity. And I want to find better words to describe what's happening, but it's interesting to watch that in types that you wouldn't expect that from, like 6 or 1 or 2 that are pretty stiff, but they're doing sexual moment to
so
moment.
it's kind of like energetic passing back and forth, but it's not. But how's it? And is that what you're saying?
It's
One thing,
not like social, for example, like
Right.
what
That's what I'm trying to
Joseph and
get that contrast
Alexandra,
with.
what they're doing is like a ping back and forth where I'm relating to you. Sexual is much more about the penetration of, you give me an apple, I give you an orange kind
here's
of a
one
thing.
way to say. Here's one way I'd say it is it's flipping electrical polarities.
Yes.
It's back and
Mm,
forth, and it's where you're switching roles. You know what I mean? If you wanted to do
mm,
positive, negative, or masculine, feminine, or whatever, it's where each person is flipping roles and keeps switching like that, and you're making a new thing, sort of, or a new hybrid that's some kind of combination of masculine, feminine, sort of in each moment or each volley or something.
That's a good word for it. Like there's energetic attraction polarity that's being played on where it can seem chaotic, But just watching these videos and seeing like, what is if this person doing self-pres in this moment, like let's say the interviewer is doing self-pres and they're asking you details about where did you go, what did you eat, who did you do it with, and then this sexual type is just sort of like trying to inject like electricity by flipping something into something unexpected or throwing some kind of a sexual innuendo in there. But there's this kind of like, I want to flip that, polarity switch on some kind of charge, sexual charge.
One thing that's an interesting example is the late night host, Craig Ferguson. He's like the only one of all of those type 6 male hosts that has sexual. He's a social sexual. And there's a series of clips of him flirting with women and even being somewhat sexual in his banter with men, and it's constantly flipping polarities and like doing radically unexpected twists that then set the other person off, and then they have to come back with something that's completely new and different.
Interesting. So, do you see that with Emeka and I?
You guys are more targeted, you know what I mean, without social. But I mean, there's a quality of a threatening sort of energy to you, relative to you guys. That's that feels like it could be chaos. That would have that kind of polarity. And the thing about the polarity thing is it's like an absolute switch in an instant kind of
Yes.
thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's that feeling with you guys of that there's that electricity in the air in your
Mhm.
presence. Yeah.
I would say that the vibe of the podcast, because there's a fair amount of sexual here, is part of what people are drawn in by is that it does feel like we can go anywhere. I've gotten some feedback from people who thought that this pod felt like a bunch of jazz musicians who were just kind of like didn't know where we were
Mhm.
going to end up. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of how we do the pod. We don't know where we're going to end up, but somehow we sort of, do this thing where we take something and we transform it and it ends up somewhere. But there's a chemistry thing going on too. That's kind of
Mhm.
what's going on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I still like can't quite grasp that, but like there's something there that makes a lot of sense. Like if you listen to a podcast, it's like very high social. There's this like scoping out the territory, like scoping out my personhood and then scoping out who you are, and this like it's something that feels like an unfolding, like, and it has a consistent direction. Whereas like, yeah, I think that we kind of go all over the place.
It's not that we just go all over the place.
Well, yeah, not all over the
It
place, but there's like
it
there's a
feels
bulk.
like penetrating. It feels
Yeah.
like you're gonna give me something. Oh, it's gonna hit me, and it's gonna
Mhm.
penetrate to something else, and oh, that's gonna penetrate me. So there's a way that we're sort of penetrating deeper to something beyond this layer, and then beyond that layer, and so it might feel chaotic to some people, but it does feel like we're going somewhere, at least to me.
It's more tunneling.
Yes.
And so, Nancy, back to your like, what has helped you see that maybe you weren't as skillful at sexual as you thought? Like, how would you even like unpack that for somebody who was maybe low sexual and thought they were sexual dominant or sexual middle?
So I think like a couple of the moments where it's become obvious that I'm lacking sexual is, first of all, like Emeka asking me to make a collage of hot people
Not just hot people,
or
that
people
you
I think are hot.
that you're attracted to.
Yeah. And I think I've had a couple of people say to me that they're like, well, I'm sexual last and I know what I think is hot. I think the difference between like knowing what you think is hot, right, and it being a specific targeted sexual instinct.
Like personally turned on or something?
You're right. Yeah, is I feel like the just consistent focus that like you guys have towards hooks. Like, it's not so much that I don't know what's hot, it's that I don't even know where to look for it. Like, I don't even know, like, I was like, Google pictures of hot people. Like, I don't even know how to look for that because it's just so not my focus. So
I just go to my Pinterest board that I've collected over
E-
the last 10 years.
exactly. You've collected it. Like you have created this like what you find as a hook. And I'm over here like, well, there was a girl in the park a couple weeks ago who was kind of hot. But it's kind of hard to put that into words because it's just a lack of focus.
So it's not like you don't have this capability. It's just that you're just not. It's almost like an unused muscle. It's like, oh shit, it seems so heavy. I can't. I can still lift it, but I have to try so hard.
Well, it kind of,
Where
but
your
it's like,
attention goes.
yeah, it's like I'm compensating and I don't even know I'm compensating.
Oh,
So it's like using a muscle that I've literally never used, but like to me, I'm like, why use it?
that's a good way to put
Because
that.
I get through life just fine without it. So it doesn't, I don't even have to focus on it. There was something else that I wanted to add, but I don't remember. It got lost in the Bermuda.
I like what you were saying about hooks
Yeah.
because that's a good sexual instinct word. If you're watching people, go ahead.
Sorry. I also have a hard time. This is sort of along the same lines, but kind of creating like my own hooks that I really identify with. Like I don't really identify with specific. Like if you look in my closet, it's very like all over the place. I could go chuggy all the way to like pop punk rocker chick, and there's no in between. I mean, there's all, and excuse me, there's everything in between. So it's kind of creating my own personal look as like not on the table because I want all of the looks, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was kind of something like you guys have very specific like ways you do you, and I'm over here like I could be any of them.
Well, that could be due.
That could be
to,
a little bit more 3 too.
Yeah, that could be due to the attachment thing because there would be some hexad types who would identify with feeling very specific and being able to generate like a look. But I think the thing that really stands out to me about sexual that's not there with sexual blinds is that sense of generating energetic hooks in the moment, not just like I can do it sometimes, like it's something that is necessary. Like we were on the latest Dark Hearts video, I was thinking about like as a sexual type, how you might feel trapped in a conversation where there isn't any sexual instinct being triggered, and it's you have to, in order to exist in that conversation, you have to generate that electricity. You have to generate those hooks. And so when you see sexual types in interviews, that's what they're doing unconsciously. They're trying to find these avenues to generate something unexpected that can hook someone, that it can, generate some charge. But that's what all the instincts are doing. It's like it's like oxygen. This has to be here in order for me to exist in this moment.
Would you say these hooks that sexuals are generating are like areas of tension? Like, because one of the things that I've looked at a lot with sexual types, or the approaches and stuff like that, the instinctual approaches, is that sexual types often are creating and trying to make tension because tension is a polarity that you have to resolve or
yes,
repel.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that. It's throwing out something that's unexpected, and that creates a tension in the other person.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. What's the difference between that and like what Courtney talks about with creating like tension between her and her partner to solve it in like the 6 creating connection way?
Good question. For one thing, it's on the level of like energy and boundaries. It's like it's a body instinct thing. And so like if you're talking about like the attachment to disconnect kind of idea, that has a much broader quality, and it has an emotional component primarily because it's an object relational thing. So like the problem might be like, cognitive or something, but the impact of it is emotional, whereas instinctual stuff is happening on the level of the body and instinct.
And sexual is like, indulging in a drug that's going to take you somewhere. You know what I mean? That's doesn't have that practical stuff of, I guess there's a danger of going out of control, and that's part of what's alluring about it and going down that trail.
Yeah, it's probably more specific referred to as like sexual tension because it's
Right.
not necessarily like it has to be about sexual innuendo or whatever, but it's the kind of tension that somebody generates where you want to get, take a closer look at them. You're more intrigued, like what this person just said or what they just did hooked my attention, and I want to see more. And so it's not necessarily creating tension in a relationship where some conflict has to be resolved. It's more like this person is doing something that or saying something that for this moment is unexpected, intriguing, and that thing that they did just created a tension that has to be resolved by my getting closer, closing the distance in some kind of way. Like, sexual types might say something that really throws a wrench in that moment, and now it's like you're, magnetized by that moment in some way.
So what about self-pres dominant? Like I get a lot of people who are like, I can't be self-pres dominant because I suck at self-pres.
That's a thing that comes up a lot. People equate competence and a certain
Yeah.
instinct
Yeah.
with, whether, and that's something that not just instinct, but also type. That sometimes people have been typed a certain way, and they don't see themselves as good enough to like some threes, or like I don't think I'm good enough to be a 3,
Mm-hmm.
or even some 8s we've typed and like, oh, I see 8s as such leaders, and I'm just not that. And so having dominance in a certain instinct just means that this is the lens that you see the world. This is what your personality is identified with. Doesn't mean that you're good at it. You probably suck at it, and that's why that's a thing that's always triggering to the over focus. Is there's not enough, and no matter how good someone is, they always feel like there's not enough of that instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Looking at myself as an example, self-pres, I think being a was a big factor in me. It took me, this is how bad the is. It took me until I was 35 before I started to get serious about having like a baseline structure of, financial wherewithal underneath me. I was relying on magical thinking that it was all just going to come together somehow. But my attention was continually going into self-pres. I mean, it was sensuality, food, sexuality on a sort of sensual, like body level, and as comfort and that kind of thing, and body regulation and so forth. And so my and money and so forth. I was wanting it to come from somewhere, right? And my thoughts were going there often. And but that's an example of how somebody could be in their 20s and be a and just not even having gone to university. Like I didn't give a fuck about like going to university so I could do X job so that I could have just this baseline salary. I'm not even designed that way.
He really isn't. I talk to you a lot about my life, and you just think it's disgusting.
Oh yeah, that's horrible.
I also, as a self-pres dominant, it took me a long time to learn what hunger was. I spent a lot of my life hungry, and I did not realize it. And I still will go long periods of time without eating just because I don't know that I'm hungry.
Not anymore.
No, I'm always snacking now, but it's because I realize that if I get hungry, I will not know it. So my solution to that is just constantly eat.
So how do you how does that make any sense? I'm trying to understand that.
Well, if I don't know when I'm hungry, it's a big issue when I get hungry, right? Because I could pass out. So I don't want to get to that. So I should just eat so that I am not hungry. So I just eat all the time.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Prior to that, what do you just wouldn't register hunger at all? Like how is it?
Yeah, I would literally just think that I was sick or something.
My first memories are of me tugging on my mom's whatever dress or whatever to tell her to take me to all these restaurants. I had specific things.
My God!
I mean, this is when I'm.
Yes.
when I was 3 or 4 years old, I would be like, there would be this one thing that we always ate at this one, or that I always ate at this one restaurant, and I would just be, mommy, take me there. That kind of shit.
Yeah.
All about food. Food.
Mama, take me to the restaurant. At 3, like,
Yeah, I was probably
like having
more
that
like
same like tone of voice, like Mama, time to take me to
Somebody's very identified with their hunger.
Mama,
Yes.
I want filet mignon.
Yes. Yeah. With hollandaise sauce.
Yeah,
Exactly.
This thing keeps coming up a lot, and I've had this in like typing follow-up sessions where self-press types don't identify or relate to the typical forms of self-pres, like cozy blankets and coffee and things like that. But it's what I like about John, your approaches, is that it's a psychological sensation or boundaries and sensation, and so it's a way that you're doing something. And so there was a self-pres 9 that I was doing a session with who talked about how he would listen to this podcast and listen to the same episodes over and over again. And it was a way that he liked doing that for TV shows. And I pointed out to him that was a way to get a sense of grounding in just listening to the same shit over and over again. You can sort of like zone out and feel comfortable in something that's conceptual.
I just wanted to say that literally today I realized that I will put like a 3-minute TikTok on loop and just listen to it over and over and over and over and over and over and over as my background noise.
Yeah, so it's interesting that people can expand the horizons of what they think, how they think an instinct can show up, because you're doing it all day, but you're not necessarily doing it the same way as the next person. Somebody might be oriented to being cozy and blankets and tea and that shit. You might just be oriented to just listening to podcasts on repeat and watching the same fucking TV shows because that's what makes you feel at home and comfortable. So it's like these approaches are describing different ways that we're orienting to the same shit and what
finding some
qualities.
kind of stability.
Right.
You said that's horrifying.
Oh yeah, and a TikTok on repeat. Oh my god.
Sometimes it'll literally be like 7 seconds, and I'm just like, yeah.
Oh my god. Oh, that hurts.
Because one thing I noticed with self-press blinds is that sense of that lack of grounding, even with entertainment, and so like like that sense of the next
That's
thing,
fair, yeah.
the new thing, and just jumping from one thing to the next.
I will Google the end of movies and TV shows and then watch the movie or TV show.
Holy shit.
Because I have to know. I just have to know.
There's a person that y'all know who identified as a sex type for a long time, and every time we go out to eat or something, he'd get something new, and he'd act like his need for variety was his sexual instinct, and it's just purely self-pres blind.
Yeah.
And what else? I mean, another thing I think that's important to mention is that we live in a capitalist dystopian hellscape, and that it is hard to get by and live in this this economy and this society, and that like I live in Brooklyn, and I have to just I walk by homeless people constantly. The homelessness is everywhere, and it's because we live in an inhumane world, and so if people are having difficulty regulating themselves, like they could look like they suck real hard at self-pres, even if they're self-pres type, because it's a very dysregulating world. So it's like whether it's you're talking about like being economically successful or just like eating right. Like our culture is very self-pres, but like really fucked up self-pres, and so just the amount of overeating and like just dehydration and all this other shit that's going on, it's just like really intense. And so a lot of our views of what it means to be like quote good at self-pres unquote are like informed more like by class signifiers, right? Like access to resources and money, and wellness industry shit is like a kind of like a wealthy person's like weird entertainment now.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's really easy to be fucked up in self-pres, but there is this looking for stability, this grounding, this sort of trying to root oneself in something. And sometimes when we're unhealthy or when we're under kind of different stress, what we try to root ourselves in itself can get kind of fucked up. That compass or that radar for what to root in gets pretty bizarre. And so, like eating disorders, all that other kind of shit. There's people collecting weird stuff. It's like, you can really be fucked up in self-pres and be self-pres dominant.
Mhm.
What about
Mhm.
we mentioned this before, like I think stuff that'll get into this episode, but like what about the self-pres person who doesn't lock their doors?
I had a friend from the Enneagram conferences who was a self-pres 6 and just always fucking forgot to lock her doors every day.
Yeah, I have a self-pres 6 friend, same thing. I don't think she does it like forgetting. I think just like she doesn't do it.
Oh my
Mhm.
god.
Yeah, I just think people should divorce the idea of being good at an instinct from what you're dominant in or what you're blind in, because it's just your location. It doesn't. It's just because you're type 8 or whatever doesn't mean that you're a good type 8 or competent or anything else. It's just like this is your personality fixation, and that's it.
Mhm.
We should hit social before we run out of time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Usually it's like how could I be a social type if I hate people
Yeah.
or if
Right.
I don't hang out with people
Yep.
or
Yep.
all this kind of shit.
Joseph initially thought he was sexual self-pres, and the way that we met was I think I was fucking with him about being mistyped on that, and so
I think that's how you and I got to know each other, Emeka. Is we were
yeah,
fucking with Joseph.
fucking with Joseph, because Joseph was very much, as he is, just a group person in terms of he was posting in groups, and he was real excited, and he was real trying to learn a lot, but he was doing all this stuff, and he was identifying with being sexual self-pres, and I was like, he's social as fuck, and so we started talking, and and that's how we got to know each other. But there's this just in my experience with typing on these Enneagram forums, there's a lot of social types who are resistant to seeing themselves as social, and there's been a lot of progress that we've made in helping people understand that social isn't about groups and going to LinkedIn LinkedIn fucking networking events, that it's literally about relating to other people and the different ways that we are over aware of that aspect of existing. And so there's still a lot of social types that still just don't think that they are social for various reasons. And I think another angle on that is just some of the hexad versus attachment stuff that we've
Mhm.
discovered, and how that if you're a hexad type, you might relate to me and John, and and I've heard some hexad types say this, that a lot of the stuff that we express as social blind is something that they relate to. And so that's a huge aspect of why a lot of times people don't see themselves as social. If you're an attachment type, you're more likely to see yourself as having social, because attachment kind of has a pseudo social aspect to it. So I think that's what I've run into. A lot of sevens don't see themselves as social sevens, don't see themselves as being social types, for
Mhm.
example.
hmm Humans are such social animals that we're all really involved with each other no matter what. But and that can make it sometimes hard for a social type to um see how social they are because it's so normal. So like Alexandra is a very withdrawn person. Like, she doesn't hang out with a bunch of people. She doesn't talk to a lot of people. It's like me and the cats and but what she likes to do is she'll like certain reality TV shows and like creeping on certain chats and things like this. Like there's a way she likes to observe people and to like watch them
Mhm.
and she'll watch these reality shows and like not buy them. Like she's looking at them at a distance and making all kinds of observations that like I'm actually trying to get her to do some kind of like she'll probably get mad at me for saying this, but like a bachelor thing with the Enneagram, because I fucking think the Bachelor's evil or whatever, the show. But she'll make these amazing insights where she'll be like, "Oh, look at that. That's when like this girl and this guy are like trying to like get together." And then he says something and then she'll be like, "This is when the girl attaches." Like she's an attachment type. And be like,
Really?
that's what she can attach
Wow.
to. Like she'll
That's
call
Oh my
it.
interesting.
god, I would watch a live stream of that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, we should do like a Twitch stream or something like this with her because call this shit, and I'm like amazed because it's like, oh my god, I'm seeing like attachment stuff has been really difficult for me to internalize as we've been
Yeah.
doing these episodes, and so like her being able to be like I'll be like, why are these fucking people doing this thing or whatever, and she's like, they don't even really like each other, but they're attaching to this, and they're
Oh.
creating a relationship out of that, and that's what this is about, and then so she's watching fucking Bachelorette, and the girl is like a 9, and she's a teacher, and she is basically like all these loser dudes. Like the whole show is just a whole fraud. It's amazing, but all these dudes are like adult children, and she's like in teacher mode with all these guys, and it'll be like Alexandra will call it where she'll be able to observe like, oh, she's attaching because she can do teacher mode with this guy.
Hmm.
Like she can relate to him like a student,
Hmm.
and she'll call it, but it's like much more sophisticated than I'm not doing a good job representing it, but it's like it's really, I mean, it's really brilliant, but she loves to observe people, and she loves to be aware of how humans are in a way that's not just attachment, it's social.
It's
Well,
a very
and-
specific, refined intelligence.
Yeah, and she naturally does it. It's not just that
Yes.
she likes it; she just immediately goes to it and is like, "Oh yeah, you didn't see that."
Exactly. So like, yeah, I was, like we'll have some interactions, and I'm like with people, like as a couple, we'll interact with somebody, and I'll come away and I'm like, that felt weird. Like I don't know what that was about, and she'll be able to break down all this fucking shit that I didn't see or couldn't pick up on. It's like,
That's
whoa,
so interesting.
Yeah.
whoa,
Yeah.
and it's like we'll have these kind of like breakdown sessions, basically. Like just she'll be like, this is what happened. This is what happened. I'm like, holy fuck, like seeing stuff. I don't know. I can get into people's like internal life, but like the kind of chessboard stuff is beyond me.
This raises an interesting question about the kinds of entertainment that we're drawn to and why we're drawn to it. Because it sounds like
Right.
Alexandra likes a lot of reality TV shows, not because she thinks they're good, but because it's an avenue to observe relational dynamics.
Exactly.
Intellectually stimulating to her.
Right. And so I just wonder, it makes me think about, the shows that I'm drawn to and why I'm drawn to those shows from, the sexual instinct point of view. And then, like, for example, Nancy and David, like what you like watching and what you're getting from it, from your self-pres lens. That'd be an interesting.
7-second TikToks on repeat.
That's not what I watch when
Hitting
I'm
those back walls
here.
with the TikToks.
Oh my god.
But yeah, that'd be an interesting way to explore instincts, is to look at the different, what the different instincts are looking for in entertainment.
David likes to watch his shows while he's sleeping.
That's it. Actually, I do.
I'm not
I
surprised.
know, I'm not kidding.
I'm not surprised.
No, like when we've hung out, and like there was one time I said goodnight to David because I was gonna like leave early the next day or something, and David had like his iPad, and he's like got a
Right in my
show on
face.
while he's sleeping.
That's how he goes to sleep, is he puts on something he wants to watch. Instant sleep.
As a 9, he
so
just
funny.
goes right into the dream world.
All right,
Did we-
so
Hit enough of social?
yeah, is there anything else? I guess it's like all the different ways that people who don't feel like they are social are still doing social, especially in these groups. Like, we know of a 7-wing H who didn't see herself as social, acts out in these antisocial ways, but is constantly doing it. So I think one of the things I said to someone I did a session with is that you have to catch yourself in the act. Not just, with the type, but even with the instincts. And I had to do that myself with sexual. It's like, yeah, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm a sexual type, or to know that you're sexual type, but all the different ways that you specifically are in that instinct, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but just observing yourself to catch yourself doing that instinct.
And I think it depends on like what triad somebody's coming from, because like an assertive social type that doesn't know they're social or doesn't see it will like do a lot to get attention.
Right.
Like I think that social 8s, 7s, and 3s will do a lot of stirring things up or trying to get attention or being a focal point. And so they might think that they're social blind, or they might think it's social middle, whatever, but they're like on a forum, they're like posting these like long things to get attention or something, or interaction, generating stuff. Whereas a withdrawn type 9, 5, 4 that's a social instinct will be much more withdrawn and kind of like I was speaking to Alexandra is like just watching and analyzing and intellectualizing the social sphere. And I don't really know how I can't really think off the top of my head how it would go for a superhero type with strong social, but those types tend to like be listening more for like the tone or temperature of
Could be
whatever they're
teaching
interacting.
and teaching,
Yeah.
maybe something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting just to watch the way people interact in these groups, just from the perspective of getting your needs met from your type and your instincts, because it's just a forum. And so, what are the social types doing, and in what ways they're trying to generate engagement and also generate attention for themselves? And to see that happen and people still not, see that they're doing social. One of the things I pointed out to Joseph when we started talking was, for me, social is so loud that it's like all this stuff that you're doing, all this tracking that you're doing, and seeing if people are worried about what their boss might think is like, that's all social. I mean, you just don't see how that might be social for you, but like I think people just need to start observing how they personally do that instinct, because it's not necessarily going to look the same for everyone.
Right. Have you ever gotten a sexual type that doesn't think they're sexual?
Yes, we have.
How'd that go?
Well, I think we typed somebody as sexual who saw themselves as social. But I've seen that happen sometimes where sexual types end up not seeing themselves as sexual for that same reason, that, I don't think I'm good at this kind of thing that comes up. It's not often, because I mean, there are not very many sexual types that come along.
Well, I mean, and that's an overall general point. Maybe we already said it, but is that if your dominant instinct, you're going to be noticing more often that you're not good at it because
Yes.
you're looking at it all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always knew I was a sexual type, but I was like, I felt like the most undesirable, like overlooked, uninteresting to people, to women, to like anti-juicy rodent boy, like my whole life. So it was like, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm a sexual type. Like, yeah, come and get it. It was like always like,
Nosferatu.
Definitely. That's a big archetype I identified with.
I feel like the people who are the best at the sort of general attraction game tend to be sexual blinds. A lot of them, because they social and self-pres. There's a lot of what is generally attractive to most people, which is kind of drawing from social. Like, I need to meet the standard of what people consider to be hot, versus what sexual is, which is sort of, I need to cultivate my own sort of unexpected, intriguing, penetrating flavor.
Well, it's a lot more universally palatable.
There you go. Yes. Yeah. Which kind of depends on what's hot at that point in time. Like right now on Instagram, most women are following the Kim Kardashian attraction template. So, the certain makeup and hair, and that's going to change in 10 years. And so that's what sort of a lot of attachment and social and self-pres is. What people consider to be hot, they're mirroring that at that point in time.
Yeah, God, so many girls are like lip filler and nose job thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, ladies, we love your big nose. We love it.
Give me a big nose, please.
Give me your natural. Like, I isn't like, at least speaking as like somebody who draws an artist. Like, when somebody's proportions are off, it's like a camera lens that can't focus because my brain is like sees that there's something unnatural happening.
Yes.
It's just like, like it can feel the offness.
Well, I think what I have an issue with is just how everyone is doing the same kind of makeup and the same kind of look with the lip filler, the makeup, and it
looking really tired.
Yeah, it all looks the same, and I'm just like, can people try different makeup, like just something else? Because everyone's doing makeup the same way. But
anyway,
all right, talk to you next week.
Hey, what episode are we on? Like, when's our 100?
This is 98, so we have one more and then the 100th episode.
Right. What are we doing again on the 100?
Love line,
calls?
calls.
Right.
Okie doke. Bye.
All right, y'all.
Okay.
Bye.
system of symbols that no one will vouch for. Everyone uses and no one believes. There's a dog in the yard with a manner that's rough. Yet there's something about you that he understands. The girl out the window, covered in ashes, smiles grotesquely in the light of the day.